Well, thanks everyone. I know it's right after lunch. It's a bit sleepy, so I'll try not to be too boring. All right. So before we start, just a quick introduction of myself. So I'm a physicist by training. I then did management consulting, mostly on the strategy space for a couple years at McKinsey, before I went to work in PC industry for 15 years, like 5 years on the strategy front and then 10 years on data analytics, before I came back to consulting for a couple years. So I think this joint between strategy and data analytics gives me a really good perspective to talk about, hey, can we use data analytics to drive strategic decision making, right? So, oops. Okay, so this is just some marketing material from the company I'm with now. I'm not going to read it. I think the key essence here is we are a consulting company, and as I was just discussing with fellow participant over lunch, right? There are actually a lot of definitions of a consultant, right? So here, the one I want to talk about is really, hey, we were, or at least we were, a management consultant type, right? It's not a solution provider. I want to stress that because it's actually related to what I want to talk about. So the story started when AI starts to develop, and we came across this report from another consulting outlet, McKinsey. We're much larger than that. We are, of course. Right? So this talks about, hey, a lot of the jobs by 2030 will be automated, right? In the range of 20% to 30%. So think about it, that's like 1 out of 5 to sometimes 1 out of 3. So the question we naturally come to think is then, hey, right, what about us, right? So we think, hey, will we, as management consultants, will we be replaced by machine? So there are two schools of thoughts, right? One school say, hey, right, no, that's not, right? Management consultants, we talk about trusted advisor. It's about building relationship with a client. Right? You don't build a trust with a machine, right? So yeah, don't worry about that. Then on the other side, we think, hey, right, say, hey, look at Ruoyu. You came into consulting as a physicist. You didn't know anything about business until you start working for McKinsey, right? So if you can learn how to be a trusted advisor, why cannot we teach a machine? And companies like McKinsey or Bain of the world all talk about all the case studies do. And if we think about analytics, it reads training data, right? If we use this as training data, can we actually train the machine to act like a management consultant and then literally get us out of the job? And also talking about trust, right? We think, hey, we may be over-exaggerating how relationship actually builds in here, because I look at my son. He has no problem trusting ChatGPT to do his homework. I have to say, I tried. His composition is really good on ChatGPT. Math, yeah, not so. Okay. So we say, hey, yeah, this is a potential risk or opportunity, right? So let's examine that. So we look at, hey, what do our clients hire us for, right? So it hires, I'm not going through all the details because this is not this is more about data. It's not really about business process. But in a nutshell, we say here, right, on the very front, this is where we want to set agenda for the client, etc. Right? There, oftentimes you do workshops, you do offsites. No, you're not going to actually get a machine to do that. At the very tail end, that's execution. That client don't even hire us because they hire FTs. They hire permanent roles to do that. They don't hire consultants. So, yeah. Those belong to the first chart where those 20 to 35% of the role gets automated, but the client don't hire consultants anyway. It's the ones in the middle. So there are two types, right? We see, hey, there are one type there's oftentimes it's urgent and it's one-off. Say the company wants to acquire another company and they want some consultants to help them, but that may happen once in every 5 years. So even though, yes, we can actually build a solution to that, it probably doesn't really worth the time and effort. Right? The time you actually build the solution for the client probably doesn't outweigh the solution they just hire a consultant to do a one-time job. But on the bottom, there are actually quite a lot of occasions where we actually brought in to help to some things that clients ask us over and over. Right? And this can happen from one client to the other client, similar questions, or sometimes even from the same client. They may, after a couple of years, say, hey, something's changed, the market circumstances changed, can you come back and do a refresh for us? Right? And when we hear the word refresh, we say, hey, this is an opportunity for automation. So can we actually do that? So that's what did, right? So we then say, look at all the engagement we did, and we see where things that we can actually try this out. So we looked at for a couple of examples. So one, this is an auto service part distributor in Asia Pacific, right? So they sell parts to the cars from things like mufflers, like car batteries, your window wipers. So they need help on their category strategy. What do we mean by category strategy is oftentimes say for example, electric cars coming in, so they say, hey, we have new categories, but do we want to combine some old categories? Do we want to launch some private label products? And it may have higher margin, but it may piss off our existing supplier. And the supplier who sells car batteries may also sell, I say, wipers. So a category manager decide, hey, we are going to launch a private label battery, may piss off the vendor, and then give a hard time to the one who manages wipers. So they say, hey, how do we think about this? And also, how do we negotiate with the suppliers, et cetera? So this is something that they do constantly. I think on a quarterly basis, they look at the category, say, hey, should we actually launch private label? Do we want to add or reduce our number of suppliers, et cetera? Another example is, this is a logistics provider. So they have a fleet of trucks. And as time goes by, the truck gets old, and they need to think about, hey, do we want to get new trucks? Right? Do we want to write them off? Do we want just to try to sell them? Or some of the trucks, they say, hey, they are old, but they can probably still have some mileage. We want to rotate them to a route that doesn't have that much volume. So this is another decision that they make at the board level, I think on the quarterly basis as well, right? So these are the questions that they bring consultants in. These are live examples. Then we say, hey, can we actually use data analytics to help them on that instead of, say, giving them a spreadsheet, and so they have to bring us in. And the beauty of building a solution, then it gets automated. So in a good or bad way, then 2 years down the road, they don't need to call us again. So we then take another look at these questions, right? We think, hey, it's actually very different from the other type of things that we oftentimes use analytics, right? So at my time in the PC industry, say in the e-com, we look at personalized landing page or fraud detection, or when you go into a bank, the RM may have something popped up on his or her windows. These are the cross-sell insurance products. So these are the things what I would call transaction analytics, right? A transaction decision-making. The advantage of using AI there is really it enhances productivity, because a human being, you cannot determine, say, in a split second when the customer comes in, what I want to sell to him or her, but the machine can, right? And also, it cannot, say, do 10,000s or hundreds of thousands of times when all consumers visit the website. But here, when we're not talking about this kind of level of productivity. So automation, if you think about on the productivity gain, is not the value proposition here, because the clients, they really make a decision, say, once a quarter. They don't mind spend 2 weeks or 4 weeks to run analysis, as long as it's good enough, right? So what is it here? And also another thing is, because the stake is so high, right, we don't have the luxury to do A/B testing, which we can, say, in the e-com space, right? They cannot say, here, right, let's try 50% of our products we launch private label and the 50 don't, and see how the supplier reacts. No, it cannot work that way. And also the decision has to be really, I would say, interactive, right? If you think about fraud detection, the engine is going to tell you, hey, whether this card can be accepted or not. If it's accepted, the order gets placed. If not, it gets declined. Human don't interact here. But in those decisions, yeah, everybody wants to jump on decision, right? They have, because it's so related to their job, it's so, everyone is a stakeholder. They don't want the black box analytics. They also want a white box. Everyone wants to see, and they want to actually engage with the tool. So then you may ask, hey, if we have all these constraints, why bother? Why do you think analytics can actually add value to these decisions? Okay, the reason we think that it's happening is because our brain is not wired to think through these things at a really accurate level. Right? If you think about these problems, they are all very complex, right? It's not one-dimensional. Because if we have a private label index, right? As long as the private label index is above 80, then you launch a private label. If below not, then it's easy. But here it's not, right? And some of these are actually not quantitative. If we talk about whether a supplier will be pissed off, how do you quantify that, right? And we as humans, we are really good at comparing things, but we are not good at thinking through multi-dimensions. Right? Let me give you an example, and everyone's familiar with conjoint analysis, right? We ask all the respondents to ask, hey, if you want to compare two products, let's say TV, right? 50-inch with 55, this price point, this brand, which one do we prefer? At the end of the day, what do we want? We want to get their preference of how much you want to pay for a larger screen TV. And why we don't ask them to that? Because they cannot tell us. As much as I want to actually work with you, I cannot tell you whether go from 50-inch to 55-inch, do I want to pay $100 extra or $200 extra? That's why we need to survey hundreds of thousands of respondents and use conjoint analysis to get the number. Same thing here, right? We are not wired to actually think through multi-dimensions. And then that's why in B school, we have things like, say, Porter's 5 forces. We have the strategy like where to play, what to offer, how to win. We have this 80-20 rules. All this does is to simplify the problem so that it makes it easier for us human brain to comprehend. And that's where we think analytics can come in. It can help us to think about the complex problem, think of multidimensional problem, sometimes qualitative, sometimes quantitative, combined together and make it interactive so that it's easier for us to comprehend and make a strategic decision. Because at the end of the day, we just need to make a decision. That's what it matters, right? And all the thinking, etc., if we can get the machine to help us, all the better. Now, I've talked about like what we want to do, how we want to, like what values it creates and all these. Let's talk about so how we actually do it, right? So we actually do it. So as I mentioned, we are a consulting firm and we are not a management consultant. So we don't do solutions. So actually, we found a partner. We found a software company in US. Actually, they're good at building solutions, but they don't lack the necessary brain, which I'm going to talk about later, is like figure out how we actually want to solve the problem. But in actually working with a client, what we found, there are some things that's actually special about these problems versus, say, the transactional decision-making. One is because these problems, these decisions happen, they recur, but they happen infrequently. Oftentimes, the data is not connected. Right? Because it happens every once a quarter, people don't mind, say, hey, we just use Excel. And if you want to automate build a solution, that doesn't work. So actually, there's a lot of front-end data engineering work that needs to be done. In some cases, we actually need to connect 17 ERP systems. And it was not an issue for the client before because previously, they do these and by the way, they have these 17 ERP systems because they got to that stage by a lot of acquisition. And it was not an issue for them because they were just working silo. Right? So as long as it worked within one ERP system, it's okay. But as soon as you actually want to have a company-wide view, that's not okay. So that's a lot of data engineering work that needs to be done up front. And also, again, oftentimes there's a lot of data enrichment because oftentimes there's data holes and data gaps, and because these problems don't happen that often, people say, yeah, it's okay, the data's, we don't need to worry about if there are data gaps and all these, but once we want to build a solution, it is. So you actually need to really do a good job on the data enrichment. Right? Then another thing I want to stress is customization and rapid customization. Why? Because the market changes, the business changes, right? Just as the auto parts distributor example. If we think about 10 years ago, there's no electric car. So the category you think about is very different from what you think about today. And you don't want the client, or at least the client doesn't want, to actually call you every time that they need to make some changes. Right? So they need rapid customization capability so that you can actually tune it or let them tune it when the market changes or any of the business changes. And last but not least, the UI is another key factor because as I mentioned before, people want to engage with this, right? They don't want just to be dictated, say, here's your answer, here's your do. And actually, they see the tool as not something that actually tells them the answer. They want a tool to help them make a decision, but not tell them to do. So you need actually really good good UI to enable that, right? You want to give people the flexibility to give them input, and they may look at everything, like every assumption, say, hey, how do we change these? And you want the tool to be able to actually react to it. So this is what we've seen on the tool front, right? On the technical front, and this is why we need a good, I would say, at least good enough solution to help on the technical front. Next, this I'll probably skim through a bit. So on that, you also need really good problem solving. So that is, because why I said before, it's not a solution provider, is oftentimes the off-the-shelf solution does not help the client, because to do that, oftentimes they need to, what I would say is fit the process to the tool, and the clients hate that, right? So in how do you actually fit the tool to the process, you need a lot of business acumen. You need to understand the process, and that's where, hopefully, like the problem solving, all this, my management consultant skill comes in, right? So we can actually break down, what I would say is break down a business problem down to an analytics problem, right, to a data problem, and so that we can actually fit the tool to the process. So so this includes things like how you can actually build it to the BMS, how you can actually add adaptability, agility into these, right? So if we combine these together, this is, this is what we get, right? So if you combine the deep business expertise and the state of a solution, this is what we get. We get a customizable AI solution to help a very specific decision-making at the strategic level, right? We actually haven't really figured out a good name or how to actually talk about this, but that's why we have such a long sentence. But we want to really differentiate, right? It's not an off-shelf tool. It's not, but you get the idea. And this is like what we think. This is something that can really help the business if you actually, from data. And this is something that a lot of companies we see is not leveraging enough of the data for. And all right, just to finish off, right? So this is so this is an example of the logistics provider we talk about. At the end, what we have is we have give them a view, they manage to have a view of the total cost of ownership. And also what's interesting is we actually opened up a lot of options for them for the replacement cycle. Why is, think about it. Previously, when they think about rotation or these, they think about, hey, can I rotate this car from this truck, from this route A to route B? And that's because as humans, we are limited, right, the options. But if you think about this optimization, hey, I have a fleet of, say, 2,000 trucks, and these are the things that I want to do. The machine can easily do say, hey, how do you place this and optimize? They can actually think about, hey, rotate car A to B, B to C, C to D, which option is, as human, we probably have not even thought about. And this just jump out at you as soon as you just load everything in, right? So now what the client does is then they would use this as their quarterly board meeting, discuss about these, and the discussion is no longer about the data accuracy and about these, right? They would say, hey, we believe in this region, our revenue is going to grow 5%, and if that's so, what does it change on our fleet, and all these discussions. And the beauty of that is that they have all these discussions without any of us consultants in the room. So to some extent, we are getting ourselves out of the job. All right, so I hope this is not too boring for a first session after lunch. And if you have, I think we do have some time for questions. And if you want to discuss further, this is my LinkedIn, this is my email.
Okay, questions. I got one question submitted via the QR code just now. So let me just read this out. Mistakes are inevitable, even with AI. So how do you think we can optimize on our human decision making even when you're using AI?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, right, this is a very good question, right? So as I just talked about, we actually aim not to actually put this as a decision-making tool. We put this as decision-making support tool. So we use this to, a lot of times, to scenario plan. We use this as like supporting the decision maker to say, hey, to de-risk. Right? And they actually, most of the time, they don't want the tool to tell them, hey, here's what I want to do. We just tell you, hey, if you want to do this, this is what happened, or this is the other option. Let them choose. Right? But again, there's also mistakes there. So again, if I talk in consultant jargons, then we caveat it, right? Instead of giving them a number, we give them a range. We give them, hey, this is 95% is going to happen, but it's not 100%.
Okay, okay, good tip. Okay, okay. Any other questions from the floor? Anyone has a question? No? Then I just have another follow-up question. So I guess when we position or use AI as a decision support tool, I guess mainly from the strategic decision-making angle, I suspect so. But how about from the operations angle, right? If they need to make, let's say, produce manufacturing, right? A lot of parts, millions of parts, right? Per day. So then would it make sense to have the AI make the decision for them to optimize the production so humans don't have to think of how to change the process when the manufacturing process is ongoing?
Yeah, I think that's the area, right? Goes from, like, the value proposition goes from how good the decision is to the area that's a productivity. So I think on that front, then automation does play a big role. And I would say the automation, AI support would be a much bigger role, because you don't want to say, hey, every decision you want to actually click yes, yes. Yeah, that doesn't work, right? You almost want to automate all the decision process.
Okay, understand. So I guess in areas where there's high stakes, I guess it's good for the decision makers, right, to have some sense of control, some sense of flexibility, right? The AI predictions or AI recommendation is just another opinion, so, and probably helpful as another source of input. So ultimately, it's the humans that finally make the high value decisions. So the AI can help us to automate those kind of operations, kind of manufacturing kind of decisions for us, especially if it's low stakes. Okay, so that's what I summarize from the discussion. Yes, questions? Yes.
Hi, thanks for the talk and the sharing. I actually just want to raise a little bit, because I got a little bit interested in the simulations that you were talking about. But I'm thinking from a perspective, because I'm building a fintech app that relies on the simulations running as well. The concerns that I always get from stakeholders is, how would that evolve the current existing body? Like for yourself, if you build it for your clients, how would that evolve your job?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, right? I would say it's inevitable, right? So the reason that we actually went down that route is we say, hey, as consultants, if we don't do it, someone else is going to do it. Then we'll not be in that boardroom anyway. So it might as well be our tool sitting in that room instead of someone else's tool. So this is if we think in the long term. But then in short term, then there will be, and one is that say, hey, you say he get you out of the job, but two, there's also new opportunities, right? It's then, if I again think about as a consultant, now my role is not just say, hey, how to solve this one problem, but my role is to say, hey, how do I think it? How do I build all the rules so that machine can actually think like me? And this actually opens a new opportunity. It's because I would say in some scenarios like that, it's the same. I don't think AI yet, especially in the strategic decision making, is to the level that saying can replace human. It can really help. But then once AI is there, the role of the human, it changes. Then it's up to us to how do we embrace that change. There's one school of thought is, hey, I try to avoid it, then I still do the same thing as before. But it's inevitable. At some point, something's going to come and you'll be forced to change. Then if that's going to happen, why don't we just stay ahead of the curve and embrace the change proactively? Yeah, hope that answers your question.
Okay, one more questions.
Thank you. Thank you for the session. My question was also around scenario planning. So any specific tool that you use for scenario planning, or is there an in-house tool that you build or with the help of an
Yeah,
external
a
party?
short answer to that, it depends. It depends, because at the end of the day, right, it's a decision maker, it's like a C-suite or the board. They may have a strong preference, because again, especially the senior leaders, they don't want to be told what to do. Right? They want to say, hey, I want to use this tool. Some say, I want to have a butterfly chart. Someone say, I want to marry macro. So we try to actually build a human element to it, to whatever that helps to convince them, right? And at the end of the day, I think it's really, if we think about the result of the decision, it's technology agnostic. So we try to stay that way.
Okay, I think with this, we come to an end to the session, and let's give a round of applause.
Thank you.